Welcome to the Billionaire's Choice. Before we begin today's story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Every story here is a journey of love, destiny, and life-changing choices. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And now, let's begin. Sometimes the most life-changing person in your life begins as a complete stranger, and sometimes all it takes is answering the wrong phone call. Rain tapped softly against the windows of Sadie Callahan's tiny apartment on the north side of Chicago, turning the city lights outside into shimmering streaks of gold and silver. The old radiator beside her couch rattled with tired determination, doing its best to chase away the chill creeping through the room. A chipped ceramic mug of chamomile tea rested beside her laptop, where another freelance editing project blinked impatiently on the screen. It was nearly 10 o'clock. The hour when the world seemed to grow quieter, when traffic softened into a distant murmur, and even the elevated train sounded almost comforting as it rolled across the tracks a few blocks away. Sadie rubbed her tired eyes and leaned back with a sigh. Another 12-hour day. Another invoice still waiting to be paid. Another promise to herself that someday she would stop living paycheck to paycheck. Her phone buzzed across the coffee table, vibrating against a stack of library books. Unknown number. She frowned. Probably another telemarketer. Or someone trying to sell extended car warranties for a car she didn't even own. She reached over, almost ignoring it, but the ringing continued with quiet persistence. Fine, she muttered, pressing accept. Hello. There was silence for 2 long seconds before a deep, calm voice finally spoke. Emily. Sadie blinked. I think you have the wrong number. Another pause. This isn't Emily. His voice carried genuine surprise, followed by a soft laugh that sounded more embarrassed than amused. No, Sadie replied, smiling despite herself. Definitely not Emily. Well, the stranger said, I guess I'm already making a great first impression. She glanced toward the rain sliding down her window. You're forgiven. Wrong numbers happen. You sound disappointingly nice about it. Should I be yelling? Maybe a little. She laughed quietly, the sound escaping before she realized it. Sorry. I'm too tired to yell tonight. The stranger hesitated again. Long day. She looked at the unfinished documents on her screen. The kind that makes frozen macaroni and cheese feel like fine dining. He chuckled, warm and genuine. Then I sincerely apologize for interrupting your 5-star dinner. Something about his voice was oddly comforting. Not flashy, not rehearsed, just real. She should have ended the call. Instead, she found herself asking, So, is Emily going to be wondering where you disappeared to? Honestly, he admitted. She changed her number 3 months ago. Apparently, I never updated it. That's impressive. I'm exceptionally talented at forgetting things that matter. That sounds dangerous. Only for my calendar. Sadie smiled to herself. Whoever this man was, he had an easy wit that slipped naturally into conversation. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere beyond Lake Michigan, distant enough to feel peaceful instead of threatening. The apartment suddenly didn't seem quite as lonely. I'm Declan, he finally offered. Sadie. Nice to accidentally meet you, Sadie. Likewise. Another comfortable silence settled between them. It wasn't awkward. It felt strangely familiar, as though 2 people sitting on opposite ends of the same park bench were simply watching the evening drift by. Declan broke the silence first. Can I ask you something? Depends. Do you always answer unknown numbers? Usually no. Then why tonight? She looked around her quiet apartment, the empty chair across from her kitchen table, the rain tracing slow lines across the glass. Maybe I was curious. I'm glad you were. His answer arrived so quickly that it caught her off guard. There was no flirtation hidden beneath it. No smooth confidence. Just simple honesty. She glanced at the microwave clock. 10:15. 15 minutes had somehow disappeared. I should probably let you go, she said. Your dinner deserves your full attention. Trust me, she laughed. Nothing deserves that much attention. He laughed with her, and somehow hearing a stranger laugh felt surprisingly reassuring after a week filled with deadlines, emails, and silence. Before I hang up, Declan said gently. Thank you for not immediately disconnecting. Before I hang up, Sadie replied. Good luck finding Emily. I have a feeling, he said after another thoughtful pause, that calling the wrong number tonight might turn out to be better than finding the right one. She smiled without realizing it. Good night, Declan. Good night, Sadie. The call ended. The apartment became quiet again, leaving only the rain and the faint humming of the refrigerator. Sadie stared at the dark phone screen resting in her hand. It had been nothing more than a wrong number. 5, maybe 15 unexpected minutes with someone she would almost certainly never hear from again. She set the phone beside her laptop and returned to her editing project, unaware that hundreds of miles away, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Declan Whitmore stood alone beside a floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at a skyline filled with blinking lights. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about billion-dollar negotiations, shareholder meetings, or tomorrow's headlines. He was thinking about the woman who had answered a phone that was never meant to ring in her apartment at all. The next evening, at exactly 10 o'clock, Sadie was halfway through proofreading a podcast transcript when her phone lit up once again with the same unfamiliar number. She stared at the screen for several seconds, surprised that she even remembered the digits. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth before she answered. "Please tell me you finally found Emily," she said. A familiar laugh greeted her instantly. "I did not, but I remembered someone much more interesting." Sadie leaned back against the worn couch cushion. "That is either very sweet or a very creative excuse. Maybe both." She shook her head, amused by how natural the conversation already felt. "So, did you spend all day calling random strangers?" "No," Declan replied. "Today was mostly meetings." "That sounds exciting." "It was not. Meetings usually are not." "You have experience?" "Enough to know that whenever someone says, 'This will only take 5 minutes,' they are lying." Declan laughed louder this time. "You are absolutely right." The conversation drifted as effortlessly as it had the night before. They talked about coffee preferences, favorite bookstores, the strange comfort of rainy evenings, and the best places in America to watch the leaves change color during the fall. Neither of them noticed that nearly 40 minutes had slipped away. After they said goodnight, Sadie placed her phone on the table and caught herself wondering what tomorrow's conversation might sound like. That realization surprised her even more than the call itself. The following night, the phone rang again at 10 o'clock sharp. Then again the night after that. Within 2 weeks, 10 o'clock quietly became part of both of their routines. Sadie would finish her work, make herself a cup of herbal tea, wrap a soft blanket around her shoulders, and wait without admitting that she was waiting. Hundreds of miles away, Declan would leave his home office, silence the endless stream of business emails filling his phone, and step onto the quiet terrace outside his Manhattan penthouse just before placing the call. Neither of them ever suggested making it official. It simply happened, as naturally as the sun setting each evening. Their conversations wandered through every ordinary corner of life. They debated whether dogs secretly understood every word humans said. They compared childhood memories of summer road trips. They confessed irrational fears, embarrassing middle school stories, and the songs they secretly loved but would never play in front of friends. Some nights they laughed until their stomachs hurt. Other nights, they simply listened while the other spoke about a difficult day. There was comfort in knowing someone was there, even from hundreds of miles away. Curiously, there were also questions they never asked. Sadie never asked what company Declan worked for. She assumed he held some demanding corporate job because he often mentioned conferences, travel, and endless meetings, but she never pushed further. Declan never asked how much money Sadie earned or why she always seemed so careful about budgeting every little expense. He respected the quiet boundaries that had formed between them. It felt strangely freeing to know someone without measuring them by titles, salaries, or social status. One evening, after nearly a month of nightly conversations, Sadie laughed and said, "Do you realize something?" "What?" "I have absolutely no idea what you look like. That makes 2 of us. You could be 80 years old. I was about to say the same thing about you." She laughed again. "Maybe I am. Then you sound remarkably energetic." "Thank you. Moisturizer and stubbornness." Declan smiled to himself as city lights stretched endlessly beyond the terrace. "Should we fix that?" he asked softly. "Video call." Sadie thought for a moment before answering. No. I like this. Just voices." "Yes. No expectations. No judging. No trying to impress each other." Declan looked down at the phone in his hand. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him without recognizing his last name before recognizing him. "I like that too," he admitted. From that night forward, an unspoken rule settled comfortably between them. No photographs. No social media, no video calls, just conversations, just voices carried across the country every evening at 10 o'clock. It became the 1 hour of the day neither of them wanted interrupted. Yet neither of them realized that outside those conversations, their worlds could not have been more different. Every morning, Declan Whitmore walked into skyscrapers where board members waited for his decisions and financial reporters followed his every move. Every evening, Sadie Callahan counted grocery coupons, searched for freelance contracts, and celebrated small victories like finishing a project before midnight. But once the clock reached 10, those differences disappeared. On the phone, there was no billionaire and no struggling editor. There were only two strangers whose lives had unexpectedly become connected by one simple mistake, and with every passing night, neither one could imagine ending the call first. Autumn quietly settled over both cities, painting Chicago's neighborhood streets with amber leaves while Manhattan reflected brilliant shades of gold between towering glass buildings. Weeks turned into months, and somehow neither Sadie nor Declan ever questioned why a conversation that began by accident had become the most dependable part of every single day. 10 o'clock no longer felt like a time on the clock. It felt like home. Sadie often caught herself smiling before her phone even rang. She would finish editing another episode, close her laptop, switch off the small desk lamp beside the window, and carry her favorite blue mug into the living room just as the familiar ringtone echoed through the apartment. Declan had developed his own quiet ritual. Every evening, he dismissed the last assistant, ignored the growing stack of documents waiting on his desk, and stepped onto the terrace outside his office overlooking the Hudson River. Hundreds of messages competed for his attention every hour. Investors wanted answers. Executives requested approvals. Financial reporters searched for comments. Yet there was only one call he never delayed. One evening Sadie asked, "Can I tell you something strange?" "You usually do," Declan answered with a smile in his voice. "Go ahead. I realize today that you know more about my favorite books than people I have known for years." He became quiet for a moment. "That is probably because I actually listen." She laughed softly. "That sounds incredibly arrogant." "It probably does. But also true." Silence followed, comfortable instead of awkward. She could almost picture him smiling somewhere far away, though she had never seen his face. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me something strange." Declan looked across the glowing skyline stretching beyond his office windows. "Sometimes I spend an entire day surrounded by hundreds of people and still feel like I have not had a real conversation until 10 o'clock. Sadie did not answer immediately. Instead, she wrapped both hands around her warm mug. "I understand that feeling more than you think." Neither of them asked why. Some questions felt unnecessary because the answer could already be heard between the words. They continued protecting the invisible boundaries that had somehow made their friendship stronger. Sadie never searched his number online. More than once she wondered if she should, but every time curiosity appeared, something inside her whispered not to ruin whatever this was. Declan did something even more difficult. His security team had quietly offered to identify the owner of the phone number after noticing the same unknown contact appearing every evening on his schedule. The information would have taken less than 5 minutes to obtain. He refused without hesitation. "If she wants me to know," he told them simply, "she will tell me herself." They spoke about dreams instead of salaries, about childhood memories instead of addresses, about favorite family recipes instead of expensive restaurants. Sadie admitted she still baked her late grandmother's apple pie every Thanksgiving, even when it came out uneven. Declan confessed that he could not cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs despite spending his adult life attending elegant dinners. "I find that impossible to believe," Sadie teased. "Believe it. So if I walked into your kitchen right now, what would I find?" He looked toward the immaculate modern kitchen inside his penthouse and smiled to himself. "An expensive coffee machine that intimidates me every morning. That tells me absolutely nothing." "Exactly," she laughed. "You are surprisingly good at avoiding personal questions. You are not exactly an open book yourself." "Fair point." They both smiled, neither realizing how carefully they were protecting identities that had somehow become less important than the connection itself. Behind the scenes, however, Declan's world continued moving at a relentless pace. Whitmore Dynamics had become one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence and telecommunications companies in the country. Business magazines featured his photograph on their covers almost every month. Television anchors debated his latest acquisitions. Invitations to charity galas, technology summits, and international conferences filled his calendar weeks in advance. Yet every interview ended the same way. Reporters always asked whether the country's most eligible billionaire was dating anyone. He always smiled politely and answered, "No comment." Meanwhile, Sadie never noticed his face on magazine racks because she hurried past them while balancing grocery bags and catching trains between freelance assignments. Her days were measured by deadlines, not headlines. She worried about rising rent, replacing the aging tires on her bicycle, and stretching every dollar until the next client payment arrived. Somehow those ordinary concerns never made her feel embarrassed when she spoke with Declan because he never treated her struggles as something to fix. He simply listened. One rainy Thursday evening, after nearly 3 months of nightly conversations, Declan asked quietly, "Have you ever wondered why neither of us is hung up first?" Sadie smiled toward the rain, tracing gentle paths down her apartment window. "Maybe because neither of us wants to be the one who ends something we secretly look forward to every day." Declan closed his eyes for a brief moment. For the first time in years, the answer to the busiest day in his life was not another business victory. It was the sound of one familiar voice saying goodnight, completely unaware that the man listening on the other end had spent months hiding the biggest truth about himself. Winter arrived quietly, wrapping Chicago in crisp mornings and frosted rooftops while Manhattan sparkled beneath strings of holiday lights. 4 months had passed since the wrong phone call, and neither Sadie nor Declan could remember exactly when a simple evening conversation had become the most important appointment on their calendars. One Tuesday night, after laughing over an argument about whether hot chocolate was better with marshmallows or whipped cream, Sadie grew unusually quiet. Declan noticed immediately. "You disappeared," he said gently. "I am still here." "Not really." She looked out her apartment window at the snow drifting beneath the streetlights. "Have you ever felt like you know someone so well that it almost feels strange you have never actually met?" Declan smiled faintly. "Every day." She let out a slow breath. "Maybe we should change that." The words hung in the silence between them. For the first time in months, neither of them knew what to say next. Finally, Declan answered, "I was hoping you would say that." Sadie laughed nervously. "Really? I have been hoping for weeks." "Then why did you never ask?" "Because I did not want to ruin what we already have." She understood exactly what he meant. Their friendship had been built entirely on conversations, honesty, and trust. There were no carefully chosen photographs, no polished social media profiles, no first impressions based on appearances. Meeting in person suddenly felt much bigger than either of them had expected. "How about next Saturday?" Sadie suggested. "There is a small coffee shop near Millennium Park that I like. It is quiet, and the cinnamon rolls are worth the trip." Declan smiled to himself. "Saturday, 1 o'clock. You promise?" "I promise." For the rest of the week, Sadie caught herself smiling at unexpected moments. While riding the train home, while shopping for groceries, even while waiting in line at the neighborhood bakery. She finally admitted to herself that she was nervous. On Friday evening, she stood in front of her closet longer than she cared to admit. Every sweater suddenly seemed either too casual or too formal. She finally settled on a simple cream-colored knit sweater, dark jeans, and the navy wool coat she had saved months to buy during an end-of-season sale. It felt like herself, and somehow that mattered more than looking perfect. Hundreds of miles away, Declan canceled 2 meetings, postponed a private investor lunch, and instructed his assistant that Saturday afternoon was completely unavailable. "Family plans?" she asked with a knowing smile. Declan paused before answering. "Something even more important." Early Saturday morning, he boarded his company jet bound for Chicago. The flight lasted less than 2 hours, but his thoughts never slowed. He imagined finally seeing the woman whose laugh had brightened countless evenings. He wondered whether she smiled with her eyes, whether she talked with her hands, whether she would recognize his voice before she saw him. As the aircraft began its descent, his phone vibrated repeatedly. His chief legal officer, then the chairman of the board, then his assistant. Finally, he answered. This had better be important. Silence filled the cabin before his assistant spoke carefully. "Sir, there has been an unexpected development. The federal regulators have requested an emergency meeting regarding the Horizon Communications acquisition." Every board member is already gathering in New York. They are insisting that you attend in person today. Declan closed his eyes. Tell them tomorrow. They refused, sir. They said delaying could cost the company the entire agreement. He stared through the airplane window as the Chicago skyline appeared beneath scattered clouds. For the first time in years, he wanted to ignore the business world completely. Reschedule it, he said quietly. I cannot, his assistant replied. They have already notified the media that you will be making a statement this afternoon. Declan looked at the clock. If he continued into the city, he would miss the meeting that could determine months of negotiations. If he returned immediately, he would break the first promise he had ever made to Sadie. His fingers tightened around the phone. At exactly 1 o'clock, Sadie stepped inside the cozy neighborhood coffee shop, snowflakes melting across the shoulders of her coat. She chose a table beside the window where she could watch people walking through the park. Every time the bell above the entrance chimed, she looked up with growing anticipation. 1:10 became 1:20. 1:30 became 1:45. Her coffee slowly cooled untouched beside her. She checked her phone twice, then 3 times. No message. No missed call. Outside, the snowfall became heavier, softening the streets into a quiet blanket of white. At 2 o'clock, Sadie finally slipped her gloves back on, forced a small smile toward the barista who had begun offering sympathetic glances, and walked slowly into the cold afternoon. Hundreds of miles away, Declan's private jet turned back toward New York, carrying a man who stared silently at the phone in his hand, knowing that somewhere in Chicago, the one person who had never expected anything from him was waiting for a promise he could no longer keep. The silence lasted far longer than either of them expected. That Saturday evening, at exactly 10 o'clock, Sadie's phone remained face down on the coffee table. When it finally began to ring, she looked at the familiar number without reaching for it. The sound echoed through the apartment until it disappeared. A minute later it rang again. Then again. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to answer. Across the country, Declan lowered his phone and rested both hands on the edge of his desk. He had left the emergency board meeting only moments earlier. The acquisition had been saved. Investors were celebrating. Executives were congratulating him. Reporters were waiting downstairs for interviews. None of it mattered. He called once more, hoping she would hear something in the sound of his voice that no text message could ever explain. But the line continued ringing until voicemail answered. He did not leave a message. For the first time since that accidental phone call months ago, 10 o'clock passed in complete silence. The following evening, he tried again. Then again the next night. Every call ended the same way. Sadie never blocked his number. She simply never answered. She convinced herself it was easier that way. If someone could disappear without a single warning on the one day that truly mattered, perhaps everything they had built had only existed inside her imagination. She returned to her ordinary routine with quiet determination. Freelance projects filled the mornings. Editing sessions stretched late into the evenings. She accepted every assignment she could find, telling herself that staying busy hurt less than wondering why he never came. One afternoon, while organizing transcripts for a local nonprofit podcast, she noticed a job posting pinned to the community bulletin board near the reception desk. A communications coordinator was needed for the Bright Horizons Foundation, a national charity expanding its education and technology programs across several cities. The position offered steady hours, health insurance, and something she had not enjoyed in years, stability. She stared at the listing longer than she expected. Thinking about applying? The receptionist asked with a smile. Sadie nodded. It feels like a long shot. You never know until you try. That evening she polished her resume, updated her writing samples, and submitted the application before she could change her mind. 3 days later her phone rang while she was carrying groceries into her apartment. Hello. Good afternoon, Miss Callahan. This is Melissa from Bright Horizons Foundation. We were impressed with your portfolio and would like to invite you for an interview. Sadie nearly dropped the grocery bag in surprise. I would love that. Thank you. The interview took place inside a beautifully restored brick building overlooking the Chicago River. The office felt welcoming rather than corporate. Framed photographs showed volunteers building playgrounds, tutoring students, and organizing neighborhood food drives. During the interview, Sadie spoke passionately about storytelling, community outreach, and the power of genuine human connection. She never exaggerated her experience. She simply spoke from the heart. 2 days later, she received the call offering her the position. For the first time in years, she celebrated with takeout pizza and sparkling water, smiling as she unpacked a brand new notebook she planned to use on her first day. Meanwhile, Declan continued dialing her number every evening at 10 o'clock. Sometimes he listened to the ringing until the final second before the call disconnected. Other nights, he ended it early, unable to bear the silence that followed. His assistant quietly noticed that he no longer stayed late celebrating successful deals or attending exclusive dinners. Instead, every evening he disappeared into his office for a single phone call that never seemed to last more than a minute. She never asked why. On Sadie's first morning at Bright Horizons, she was greeted by friendly coworkers, warm coffee, and a sense that perhaps life was finally moving forward again. She threw herself into planning newsletters, editing volunteer stories, and preparing materials for upcoming fundraising campaigns. Everyone spoke with admiration about the anonymous founder whose vision had transformed the organization into one of the country's fastest-growing charitable foundations. Oddly, no one seemed to mention him by name. They simply called him the founder, a private businessman who rarely appeared in public but personally approved every major initiative. Sadie smiled whenever she heard stories about his generosity. Whoever he was, he sounded like someone who believed people deserved second chances. She never imagined that the mysterious founder and the man whose calls she continued ignoring every single night were the very same person. 3 months passed, and spring slowly replaced the last traces of winter across Chicago. Trees along the Riverwalk bloomed with fresh green leaves, and Bright Horizons Foundation prepared for its largest annual fundraising gala. The entire office buzzed with excitement as volunteers arranged guest lists, finalized presentation slides, and coordinated donations that would support scholarships, technology centers, and neighborhood education programs across the country. Sadie had quickly earned the respect of her colleagues. Her newsletters felt personal instead of promotional. Her interviews with volunteers captured real emotion instead of polished marketing language. More than once, coworkers remarked that she somehow made complete strangers feel like family through nothing more than words. On the morning of the gala, her supervisor, Linda Morrison, stopped beside her desk carrying a navy blue envelope. "Congratulations," Linda said with a warm smile. "You are officially attending tonight." Sadie looked up in surprise. "Me? You wrote most of the campaign stories that inspired this year's donors. You deserve to be there." She accepted the invitation with grateful hands. "Thank you. I have never been to anything like this." Linda laughed softly. "Then prepare yourself. There will be cameras, business leaders, philanthropists, and enough tuxedos to fill an entire department store." That evening, Sadie stood in front of the mirror inside her apartment, smoothing the deep emerald dress she had rented for the occasion. It was elegant without feeling extravagant, and paired with the same navy wool coat she had worn on the day she waited at the coffee shop. It reminded her how much life had changed in only a few months. She quietly brushed away that memory before leaving for the hotel. The grand ballroom overlooking the Chicago River glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly near the entrance while guests greeted one another with warm handshakes and cheerful conversation. Waitstaff carried silver trays filled with sparkling water and elegant hors d'oeuvres. Everything felt sophisticated, yet surprisingly welcoming. Sadie wandered through displays highlighting scholarship recipients and community projects, smiling as she recognized stories she had helped write. For the first time in years, she felt proud to be exactly where she was. Across the room, event organizers suddenly became noticeably busier. Security staff adjusted discreetly near the entrance. Several board members straightened their jackets while exchanging excited glances. Linda stepped beside Sadie again. "The founder is finally here." Sadie looked toward the entrance with casual curiosity. "I have heard everyone mention him, but nobody ever says his name." Linda smiled knowingly. Most people recognize his companies before they recognize the man. The ballroom lights softened slightly as the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Conversations gradually faded until the room settled into respectful silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "thank you for joining us tonight in celebrating the power of opportunity, education, and compassion. None of this would have been possible without the extraordinary vision of one individual. Applause echoed throughout the ballroom. Sadie joined in politely, still scanning the room without much expectation. Please join me in welcoming the founder of Bright Horizons Foundation, the chairman and chief executive officer of Whitmore Dynamics. The host paused as every spotlight shifted toward the entrance. Mr. Declan Whitmore. Time seemed to stop. Sadie's hands froze in the middle of her applause. Her heartbeat became the only sound she could hear. Walking calmly into the ballroom was a man in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo whose confident smile was instantly familiar despite being seen for the very first time. It was not his face that she recognized first. It was the way he nodded politely while greeting people, the quiet warmth in his expression, the calm confidence that matched every late-night conversation she had ever shared with him. Then he thanked someone standing nearby, and his voice carried effortlessly across the room. One sentence. That was all it took. Sadie felt the floor disappear beneath her. She would have recognized that voice anywhere. Declan's eyes swept naturally across the crowd while acknowledging guests one by one. Then they stopped, directly on her. Every expression around him seemed to fade into the background. For one long, impossible moment, neither of them moved. Months of laughter, conversations, unanswered calls, and unspoken questions crashed together in complete silence. Across the crowded ballroom, without speaking a single word, they both realized the impossible truth. The stranger who had accidentally called the wrong number, and the billionaire standing beneath the brightest lights in the room, had always been the same man. The applause gradually faded, but Sadie could barely hear it. Around her, guests admired the evening's distinguished speaker, smiling as cameras flashed, and board members welcomed Declan Whitmore onto the stage. She stood perfectly still, her fingers tightening around the edge of her evening clutch as one impossible realization settled over her heart. Every late-night conversation, every shared laugh, every thoughtful silence, every promise, they had all belonged to the man standing only a few yards away. Declan accepted the standing ovation with quiet humility before delivering a heartfelt speech about education, opportunity, and the importance of believing in people before believing in numbers. His words were sincere, almost identical to the conversations they had shared night after night. Yet now every sentence sounded different. Sadie was no longer hearing only Declan. She was hearing one of the most recognizable business leaders in America. When the presentation ended, guests surrounded him almost immediately. Investors congratulated him. Local officials thanked him. Reporters requested interviews. Through the crowd, Declan searched for only one face. Their eyes met again for a brief second. He quietly excused himself from another conversation and began walking toward her. Sadie did not wait. She turned and slipped through a side doorway leading onto a quiet terrace overlooking the Chicago River. Cool spring air brushed against her face as she gripped the stone railing, trying to steady her breathing. A few moments later, the terrace door opened softly behind her. Sadie. She closed her eyes for a second before answering. So this is why you never wanted a video call. Declan stopped several feet away, giving her space. I wanted to tell you. She let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. When he hesitated. I do not know. After the first month? She asked without turning around. After the second? After 3 months? After I trusted someone I had never even seen. The river below reflected hundreds of shimmering lights, but Sadie could not bring herself to admire the view. You knew exactly who I was every single day, she continued softly. You knew where I lived. You knew my dreams. You knew what I worried about. But I never even knew your last name. I never looked you up, Declan answered immediately. I never asked anyone to investigate you. I wanted every conversation to stay exactly as it began. Just two people talking. She finally turned to face him. You expect me to believe that? It is the truth. You are one of the richest men in the country. Her voice never became loud. Somehow that made every word heavier. Do you know what it felt like waiting in that coffee shop? Declan lowered his eyes. Every minute. No, she said quietly. You know what it felt like leaving. That is different. He accepted the words without defending himself. You deserved an explanation. I deserved a phone call before 1 o'clock. Silence settled between them. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly through the closed glass doors, sounding distant enough to belong to another world. Declan slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, but stopped before pulling anything out. I have replayed that day in my mind every night since it happened. Then why did you never tell me who you were afterward? Sadie asked. Because after I broke my promise, I was afraid my name would sound like another excuse. He met her eyes with complete honesty. If I had called and said I missed our meeting because I had to save a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, what would that have sounded like? Sadie did not answer because she already knew. It would have sounded exactly like privilege speaking to someone whose entire life had been shaped by ordinary responsibilities. I never wanted you to think money mattered more than you, Declan continued. The truth is that I hated every second of making that decision. But you still made it. Yes. He did not deny it. And I would spend the rest of my life wishing I had found another way. Sadie searched his face for anger, arrogance, or self-pity. She found none of them. Only regret. Real regret. Yet regret could not erase months of unanswered questions. Do you know what hurt the most? She asked gently. Declan shook his head. I never cared whether you were rich or poor. I cared that every night you sounded like the most honest person I had ever met. She paused, her eyes glistening beneath the terrace lights. Then I discovered the biggest part of your life was something you never trusted me enough to share. Those words lingered between them far longer than either of them moved, because for the first time since one accidental phone call had changed both their lives, neither silence nor conversation could bridge the distance that had suddenly grown between them. The days following the gala passed with a quiet heaviness that neither Sadie nor Declan seemed able to escape. They crossed paths only in passing at the Bright Horizons office. Whenever Declan visited for board meetings or project reviews, employees naturally gathered around him, eager to share updates and shake his hand. Sadie always remained polite, offering a professional greeting before returning to her work. She never avoided him. But she no longer looked at him the way she once had when his voice alone could brighten an ordinary evening. Declan respected the distance she had chosen. He never asked her coworkers about her. He never requested private meetings. Instead, he waited, hoping time might succeed where explanations had failed. One Friday afternoon, Linda stopped by Sadie's desk carrying a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. This arrived for you, she said. There is no note, only your name. Sadie looked at the modest parcel curiously. It felt surprisingly heavy for its size. After Linda walked away, she carefully untied the simple cotton string and lifted the lid. Inside rested an older model smartphone, perfectly preserved despite showing gentle signs of years of use. Beneath it lay a handwritten card in familiar handwriting. It simply read, "Please listen before you decide that everything was a lie. Declan." She hesitated for several long seconds before pressing the power button. The phone slowly came to life. There were no business applications, no financial reports, no family photographs. Only one folder placed directly in the center of the screen. Its title read, 10 o'clock. Her heartbeat quickened as she opened it. Inside were hundreds of voice memos, each dated carefully. The first recording began the night after the wrong number connected them. Declan's voice filled the quiet office through the phone's speaker. She laughed tonight. I have attended board meetings with presidents and negotiated billion-dollar agreements. Yet somehow making a stranger laugh for 5 minutes feels like the best part of my day. Sadie swallowed hard and opened another recording. She told me about her grandmother's apple pie tonight. I almost told her who I really am. I could not do it. Not because I wanted to deceive her, but because I was terrified that my last name would become the only thing she could hear. Her fingers trembled as she continued listening. Every recording captured another ordinary evening they had shared. Some lasted 30 seconds. Others stretched several minutes. One after another, they revealed thoughts he had never spoken aloud during their calls. She had a difficult day. I wish I could solve every problem she carries, but I think what she really needs is someone willing to listen. Another recording followed. My assistant asked why I smile at exactly 10 every night. I told her I finally have one conversation where nobody expects anything from me except honesty. Tears slowly gathered in Sadie's eyes as she opened the final recording, dated the day he failed to meet her at the coffee shop. His voice sounded different. Tired. Unsteady. If you ever hear this, I hope you know I chose the company today only because thousands of employees depended on that decision. It was the hardest business choice I have ever made because for the first time in my life, success felt like failure. I kept hoping you would answer one more call, so I could apologize before my name made everything sound like an excuse. Sadie quietly lowered the phone onto her desk and noticed one final item hidden beneath the recordings. It was a digital notebook. Every page began with the same words. Tonight she smiled. Tonight she challenged me. Tonight she reminded me that kindness still exists. There were more than 120 entries, one for nearly every conversation they had ever shared. None of them mentioned stock prices, acquisitions, or wealth. Every page described simple moments she barely remembered saying. The way she always wished him good night before hanging up. The way she laughed whenever she was nervous. The way she believed ordinary people could still change the world one act of kindness at a time. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the office windows, Sadie realized something she had never considered before. Declan had hidden his fortune, but he had never hidden his heart. Every conversation had been real. Every laugh had been genuine. Every evening at 10 o'clock had mattered just as much to him as it had to her. For the first time since walking away from him on the hotel terrace, she picked up her own phone, stared silently at the familiar number she had ignored for months, and wondered whether some mistakes deserved one final chance to become the beginning they were always meant to be. The office had long since emptied when Sadie finally picked up her phone. The evening sun painted the Chicago skyline with warm shades of orange, and for the first time in months, 10 o'clock no longer felt like a reminder of disappointment. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. She stared at Declan's number for several quiet moments before pressing the call button. The phone barely rang once. Sadie? His voice carried the same warmth she had missed more than she wanted to admit. You answered quickly, she said softly. A gentle laugh escaped him. I have been hoping for this call every night. She closed her eyes, smiling despite herself. Can we meet tomorrow? There was a brief silence before he answered. Anywhere you choose. The same coffee shop. Another pause followed, this one filled with quiet emotion instead of uncertainty. I will be there early, he promised. The following afternoon, sunlight streamed through the familiar windows of the neighborhood coffee shop near Millennium Park. This time, Declan arrived nearly an hour before their meeting, choosing the same table beside the window where Sadie had once waited alone. He carried no security team, no assistants, and no business phone. Only a small paper bag rested beside his coffee. When the bell above the entrance chimed, he looked up immediately. Sadie smiled nervously as she walked toward him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Declan stood. Thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting this time, she answered with a gentle smile. The tension between them slowly dissolved as they sat down. They talked for nearly 2 hours, not about business or missed opportunities, but about everything they had never managed to say. Declan apologized again, this time without defending himself. Sadie admitted that listening to his recordings had shown her something she had forgotten during her anger. Trust was not measured by perfection. It was measured by what someone consistently chose to do when nobody else was watching. Every night at 10 o'clock, he had chosen her. Every recording proved it. Before they left, Declan slid the small paper bag across the table. There is one more thing. Curious. Sadie opened it carefully. Inside lay an old smartphone charger, neatly wrapped around a familiar cable. She laughed through tears. You kept everything. I promised myself that phone would never lose power, he replied. It reminds me of the best mistake I have ever made. Spring gradually turned into summer. Their relationship no longer existed through telephone calls alone. They explored bookstores, walked along Lake Michigan, volunteered together at Bright Horizons community events, and discovered that the easy conversations they had shared over the phone felt just as natural sitting beside each other. Employees at the foundation quietly noticed that whenever Declan visited, he always found time to help unpack donated school supplies alongside volunteers instead of remaining inside executive meetings. Sadie often teased him that he finally looked happier carrying cardboard boxes than signing contracts. He would simply smile because she was right. 1 year after that accidental phone call, Bright Horizons celebrated the opening of its newest community learning center. Families, volunteers, teachers, and donors gathered beneath bright blue skies as children explored reading rooms and technology labs that would soon serve thousands of students. During the ceremony, Declan thanked everyone for believing that kindness could change lives in ways money alone never could. Then he turned toward Sadie, who stood quietly among the volunteers, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He walked across the stage carrying a small velvet box before stopping in front of her. The crowd gradually fell silent. Declan smiled with the same calm warmth she had first heard through a stranger's voice many months earlier. "People always ask me what the smartest decision of my career was," he said. "They expect me to name a company I built or an investment I made. They are all wrong." A ripple of gentle laughter moved through the audience. He opened the ring box and looked directly into her eyes. "The smartest decision I ever made was refusing to hang up after calling the wrong number." Tears filled Sadie's eyes as he continued. "You taught me that the greatest conversations happen when nobody is trying to impress anyone. You reminded me that success means very little if there is no one waiting to hear about your day. Most of all, you loved the man behind my last name before you ever knew what that name was. Sadie Callahan, will you marry me?" She nodded before she could even find the words. "Yes," she whispered, laughing through happy tears. "Yes, I will." As friends and co-workers applauded around them, Declan slipped the ring onto her finger and gently took her hand. That evening, just before 10 o'clock, they sat together on a quiet bench overlooking the Chicago River. Sadie looked at him with a playful smile and asked, "Do you realize something?" "What?" "You never did find Emily." Declan laughed softly and squeezed her hand. "No," he said, "because I was lucky enough to find the right person with the wrong number." If you enjoyed this story, please like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to the Billionaire's Choice. Every week, we bring you heartwarming stories of love, destiny, and life-changing decisions. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.